Hi, all, and welcome back to Broadway Unexpected. Sorry, we're still dropping the subtitle for now, guys. Apologies. I am very excited to say we have none other than Broadway Tony Award-winning actress Ali Stroker on with us today.
Hi, so nice to meet you, Maya.
Hi! You too. Ali was last in Babbitt at the Shakespeare Theater Company, is best known for her role as Ado Annie in the 2019 revival of Oklahoma, which was amazing. Great to have you on today, Ali.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited.
Yes. So I always like to start at the very beginning of someone's theater career to kind of get a sense of like how they got to where they are now. So to kind of start, yoink, how did you first get started in theater? Was there a show that kind of like ignited the spark for you, or was it something that came more later on? Like how did that come about?
Yeah, so I was introduced to theater when I was 7 years old
Mhm.
at the Jersey Shore. And our family had a home there, and our next door neighbors had three kids. And their oldest daughter, Rachel, decided to direct a production of Annie. And she cast me as Annie, and it was in our backyard, and it was like all kids, all neighborhood run. And it was one of those magical moments of kids just being creative and believing in themselves, and that was where I kinda caught the bug.
Had you like prior to doing that, Annie, had you been like singing, singing along to television, expressed our intro? So was it more just like, oh, Rachel's doing the show. This sounds like fun type thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always loved music,
Hmm.
but I was really shy, and I was injured in a car accident when I was 2, and so I think a lot of those younger years well, actually, to be completely honest, I don't remember. I don't really
Same.
remember what I was like until I was introduced to theater, and that
Hmm.
was just, like, a turning point for me, and I really
Yeah.
felt like, "Oh, wow, this is who I am, and this is now who I'm going to be,"
Yeah.
versus I think the identity of just being a little girl in a wheelchair felt like, that doesn't resonate, but
Yeah.
being, a little girl who does theater and is an actress and a singer, that to me felt exciting.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree because as growing up, I lived in Wisconsin, very small Midwestern town, and I was the only disabled kid at my school. So I was like, I'm not obviously permanently confined to a wheelchair, but I was in a wheelchair for a period of time. So I think it's kind of similar to you a little bit. I had a similar experience of like, I just don't want to be the only disabled kid here, but I love music
Yeah.
and I love theater. And so, yeah.
Amazing.
So, besides Annie, what was your favorite show you did as, like, a child, like, prior to high school, college, all that?
Yeah, great question. So my favorite show that I did was probably The Wiz. I did it in 4th grade, which was really fun.
Yeah.
And then I also in high school did a production of Les Mis, which was
Oh, that's
so
fun.
fun and so amazing and so epic. So those are like two of my favorite sort of childhood theater
Yeah.
experiences that I ever had. And then professionally, I love Spring Awakening. I loved my experience with Oklahoma. I didn't necessarily love the show Oklahoma before I did it.
Yeah.
I thought it was more
100%.
traditional, and
Mhm.
I guess any of the productions that I had ever seen felt a little bit like uh they felt I guess sort of traditional and surface.
Mhm.
So it wasn't necessarily like my favorite musical, but then when I got to do it and I got to play Ado Annie, like that really changed my life and allowed me to connect to another part of the show and the character.
Yeah, definitely. So, I understand, so you went to NYU, and so what was it like being Mrs. Sharp at NYU? What was it like workshopping a new musical? Like, how
Yeah. I love that you brought Mrs. Sharp up. I had such an amazing time on that show
Yeah.
because I knew the writers, and they
Mhm.
became really good friends. And so it was like being in the room and being a part of creating who this person was. And I just thought the music was incredible. I loved the story. I
Mhm.
loved that there was kind of a twist. And yeah, it really gave me so much confidence to believe that characters can be changed
Yeah.
and they don't have to originally be written for somebody in a wheelchair for me to play them.
Yeah. No, that makes was I guess then going off like the doesn't necessarily have to be written to be made for a girl in a wheelchair, what was the production for you? Doesn't necessarily have to be one you were in or maybe just even one you've seen that made you feel like I don't mean to use these words like seen or represented finally
Yeah.
as a disabled actress.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think what is so powerful about being an actor in a chair is that it's always in the room and
Mhm.
it's always on stage. So I don't really feel like there was ever a time that I arrived at feeling seen because I always felt like my chair was seen. But I
Mhm.
think doing Oklahoma was a moment when I felt like my chair really enhanced and made my work better.
Mhm.
And I'll explain why. So, when I played Ado Annie in the story, Ado Annie has two boyfriends,
Yeah.
Will Parker and Allie Hackham. And something really fun and cool that we discovered was what does the physical vocabulary look like with each of those relationships? So with
Mhm.
Will Parker, he always sat on my lap. And then with Allie Hackham, I got out of my chair and sat on his lap. And this is something that I have drawn directly from my life as being somebody in a chair is
Yeah.
that your physical vocabulary looks different in every relationship that you're in.
Mhm.
And so that was something that I felt like this makes the character and the story even more interesting. And it's not written in the book, it's not written in the music, but it's something that I bring as a disabled artist and actress. And
Mhm.
then to be nominated and to win a Tony Award for that work really made me feel like, wow, like what I do is celebrated and appreciated and respected. And that
Yeah.
was something that I had always wanted.
Yeah. Were there any other shows besides Oklahoma where you really were able to use your chair or, make it a part of the room and sort of expand your physical vocabulary?
Well, when I did Spring Awakening on Broadway with Deaf West, that was
Mhm.
really cool because, we all had to work together very closely to make that show work. It was like a machine because, you know, I was one of the hearing actors in the show, so I had to cue some of the deaf actors in secret ways, so that they knew when to start signing, in songs and things like that. But I also felt like my chair and having a visible disability in that show
100%.
was interesting because deafness isn't always visible, right?
Mhm.
And obviously, sign language is, and that's another language. But it made me feel really like, oh, we are using our disabilities to create opportunities to make a story even better. And I just thought that, the fact that there was multiple disabilities on stage was really unique and really cool and just set kind of the tone for the production that, like, these are all different characters with different abilities, but we're all telling the same story about feeling misunderstood and communication getting crossed, and also just being, like, so curious about our bodies and about sexuality and about, you know, what the world is. And so, anyway, I I think that I don't think the world is filled with different abilities and different disabilities, and, um, I just love when that's represented on stage.
Yeah. Well, how come, with Spring Awakening, like you had mentioned, guys have like secret ways about the cue and whatnot, but how did the pairing on stage, so to speak, with the hard of hearing and the hearing actors work from a logistical standpoint?
So, we did the show 2 times before it came to Broadway,
Okay.
and so we had 2 productions of experience,
Mhm.
um, but then, like hearing a cue, there like, most of the leads in the show who were deaf actors had to see the cues.
Yeah.
So those cues were either coming from hearing actors on stage, or we had cameras um, up kind of by the mezzanine that we could see from the stage with our conductor
Yeah.
cueing both hearing, and if the deaf actors were looking that way, they could see when it came in.
Yeah.
However, I feel like we did more cueing on stage for each other and
Okay.
for the actors with who were deaf.
Yeah. What was it like performing the show both in ASL and in English simultaneously, from a performer perspective?
Yeah, I loved it. So I really, really, really love ASL. I find it to be so um it feels so organic to me. And it's a language that I knew the alphabet when I went
Mhm.
into the production, but that was it.
Yeah.
And, when there's a big enough reason to learn a language, you learn it quick. And working on a production, we all wanted to talk to each other. We all wanted to communicate to each
Yeah.
other. So I remember after rehearsals, we'd go out and we would like try to learn sign language. And it
Oh,
was
that's
like
awesome.
sort of a mix of like learning a few things. And then the deaf actors were so patient and so amazing and would teach us. And then to get to learn the interpretation of it for the show was so cool because it's I guess the best way I can articulate it is it feels like this deeply emotional language
Mhm.
because of the physicality of it
Mhm.
and the expressions that it includes. And so I just feel like it is so powerful on stage. So to get to speak and sing and sign was felt like an opportunity of a lifetime to do that on
Yeah.
Broadway.
How did the production incorporate like themes of wordlism and deaf education, despite neither being explicit themes in the original script? But obviously, Deaf West took a different interpretation of it. So how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, we learned a little bit about how, like, the deaf community was treated
Mhm.
in, I think Spring Awakening is set in either 1850 or right at the turn of the century.
Yeah,
And
like
so
19th century-ish. Yeah.
yeah, and so, you know, deaf children were reprimanded for not, reading lips. They were not allowed to sign. And so that was included in one of the scenes leading up to Bitch of Living,
Hmm.
which I just thought was really, really powerful that we were able to take like the historical context of how this community was treated and how it could work in the show as well. Um, and you know, disability on stage is very raw. It's very vulnerable. There's like there's like a sex scene between Venla and Melchior in the show.
Yep.
And to watch them kind of so the way that the show, I should include this, is that the girl who played Venla was deaf, Sandra Frank, and she had a voice, and that was played by Katie Bowick, and Katie played the guitar and spoke and sang all of Sandy's lines.
Yep.
But what was cool in some of the scenes was that sometimes the, speaking was taken out, and it was just signed,
Oh,
and
that's
I
cool.
felt like that was a real moment for who the members of the audience who were hearing to
Mhm.
understand what it might be like if you were a deaf person in that show and in that audience. I
Yeah.
just thought that was really powerful and moving. And again, it is exposing and using disability on stage in the way that I think it is meant to be used, like it invites people in. And another thing,
Yeah.
Maya, that I talk a lot about is like culturally we are taught like don't stare, don't ask, don't point at disability, but it creates such a divide.
Mhm.
And so people feel like afraid of disability because they're taught to not engage with it. So that's another reason why I feel so strongly about disability being on stage.
Yeah.
Because it
Did you
gives
th
an audience, so sorry, I just realized it
Oh my
gives
god.
an audience an opportunity to watch, to be a part of this world for however long the show is.
Yeah. Did you feel like Spring Awakening was the first time we'd ever really seen that, like, I don't wanna say exposure of disability on stage, or did you feel like there were other shows that got into that similar level, I guess?
So Deaf West had, Big River on Broadway,
Mhm.
and that was another show like Spring Awakening where, um, there were deaf actors and it was signed and spoken. But, as far as, like, wheelchair users, I actually became the first person in a wheelchair when I did Spring Awakening to ever be on Broadway and, like, made history as the
Yeah.
first person, which is crazy because it was 2015, and I was like, "Wait a minute, we have to check our facts, like, that
That
doesn't
was
seem right, like, what do
10
you
years, well,
mean?"
11 years ago now. Like,
I know, like, "Wait, what?" So, that was, like, a real moment, definitely, for me to be like, "Whoa, I can't believe this is happening," and then also that came along with a lot of, sort of press and opportunities to talk about that, and, um, I think I was pretty nervous at first because, I used to feel very nervous speaking about disability because I wanted to represent, but at the same time, my disability is specific, and
mhm.
the disabled community is very wide,
Yeah.
and so, I'd always say, like, "I'm speaking from my own experience," right? Because everybody you could have the exact same injury or diagnosis or disability or whatever and have such different experiences.
Yeah.
So I felt nervous about it, but in that moment, I was being sort of handed a platform to speak about disability in theater. And so, I tried really my best and and there's been a lot more people in chairs on Broadway since.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting.
I don't mean to put a Debbie Downer into this whole interview. I'm not trying to do that, nor
Yeah.
am I necessarily trying to call anyone out here. But have you felt even after Oklahoma, even after winning a Tony, have you experienced any more stigma or discrimination, even with how far we have come, in my opinion?
You know, I am I am really fortunate. I have incredible representatives. So I have
Yes, because
managers, yeah, and agents. And so I don't really get that kind of discrimination straight to me.
yeah,
Um, you know, I'll hear stories about, oh, this wasn't able to be made accessible. But as far as like people being discrimin discriminatory to my face, I don't feel that, Maya. Like, that's not an experience that I have at this point in my life.
thankfully. Yeah,
And, this industry obviously like has big steps to take. And, there needs to be a lot of change. But as far as like discrimination, that's not something that I experience.
yeah,
And if it, if somebody from the outside would label it as experience is as if somebody from the outside would label certain parts of my life as discrimination, again, that's not my experience.
exactly.
Do you know
No,
what
that
I'm
makes
saying? And
sense.
and I
Yeah,
also am very strong about how I view things and the kind of situations that I put myself in,
yeah,
right? Like, I'm not looking to go to the Met Gala. Why would I?
no,
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, 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 that makes
it's not
sense.
accessible.
That makes sense. It's unaccessible.
And in my life and being in a chair since I was 2 years old, I don't do things that would be hurtful or and I also know that there are people out there who don't have disabilities who also don't feel like certain situations are for them.
100%.
And that's okay. I don't blame other people. Now, are there parts of the world and certain situations that I wish that were more accessible? Yes. And
Yeah,
I'm also not going to wait for somebody else to do it.
no,
I want something to be accessible. I better get that done.
yeah,
So
100%.
that's how I lead my life.
Yeah, 100%. So, kind of transitioning more into Oklahoma, you had mentioned kind of just more like a traditional musical, very first kind of thing of like the book musical era. So, what was it like doing such like a musical that's perceived as traditional and old timey, whatever you want to call it? What was it like doing it in the round in this immersive space? You have Circle in the Square, like how that?
Yeah, great question. So, um, Oklahoma is definitely one of these like classical American musicals.
Yeah,
And even before I auditioned, I had heard about this particular production because it was done up at Bard
Mhm.
College,
Bard College, yeah.
like as an experimental kind of production.
Mhm.
And so it had been kicking around for like 10 years. And then they were going to do it at St. Anne's Warehouse. And I had
Yeah.
always wanted to work at St. Anne's. St. Anne's is like this really cool, huge space out in Dumbo in Brooklyn. And oh, feeling very curious back there. Jesse, do you want to come say hi? Yep, come on in and say hi. Come say hi to Maya. This is Jesse.
Hi! Oh, what's that
Hey,
you have here? Oh
who's
my
this?
gosh.
This is Monkey Wyatt. This is Monkey Wyatt. That's his
Oh.
favorite stuffed animal. This is Maya, and she has
Hi.
a podcast, and she's just interviewing mommy. Isn't that cool?
Aw.
Itchy. You have an itchy nose. Oh, brother. Do you want to tell Maya what's going on outside here? It's snowing outside, but there's a lot of snow. Yeah,
There's a lot of
there's
snow?
a lot of snow outside. Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
see out can you see outside still?
Yeah. You have to
Yeah.
you have to see it sometime. Yeah, he wants
Oh
you
my
to see it
gosh.
sometime.
Yes,
Maya's in
definitely.
Nashville right now, and it's not snowing,
Oh.
but there's big dark clouds, so it might snow soon. It might snow. It might snow.
Yes, and it might. We
Look,
might get as
I
much as you
didn't do
guys,
it
you never know.
anywhere. Didn't do it anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna finish my interview with Maya. Do you want to go watch a little more Blippi, and then I'll be right out? Yeah. Okay, I'll meet you out there. Okay, say bye bye to Maya. Bye bye, Maya.
Bye
Good night.
bye, Jesse.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, I'll be out in just a minute. Okay.
Aside from I understand, so aside from Judd, who I understand characterization was definitely a little bit changed. Was the characterization or personality of any of the characters changed from the, like, original, was it 1947 to now production?
Yeah,
Or
I
not
mean,
to your
I think
knowledge?
that a lot of the characters were changed, but within the story, like
Yeah.
there's different ways to play Curly, and
Mhm.
this happened to be like a crooning, guitar playing sort of emotional Curly,
Yeah.
and Lori was really fiery, and in our production, I think that is who Lori is. So it's
Yeah.
really, I guess, interpretation, but also like what is written and what is the truth there versus
Mhm.
sort of the archetypes of just like funny best friend, like
Yeah.
ingenue. It's like where
Mhm.
else do we go? What does the script tell us? So I think it actually stayed pretty much in the world of our version of Oklahoma, which was a darker version.
Yeah. How did you kind of follow-up question to that then is with, making, Laura more fiery and, you have Curly being this crooner and kind of, changes that exist, even if it's not flavored in the script, but how did you balance the original script on Mill still making it acceptable to modern audiences? I guess there were different social norms. The script was written, 60 years, more than 60 years ago. Like, how did you, yeah, do you want to that?
Yeah, I mean, our director really wanted to bring out the darker side of, this community.
Yeah.
And, America has all parts, right? Like,
Mhm.
there are people who are really angry, there are people that are very hopeful, there are people who are a product of their environment. And so I think that we all just tried to stay really true to the script and what
Mhm.
these people wanted, and also to really represent and bring out the divide in communities. And so for Oklahoma, it's the farmer and
Yeah.
the cowman. And like those are two separate groups and how they fought and how they didn't get along and how complicated that was. And also, what kind of traditions these communities had, like the picnic basket scene
Mhm.
and, weddings and the way that they all take care of each other, the way that they betray each other. All those things I think are the truth about communities. And so our director just really wanted to bring that out and make it feel real. And listen, like the production was people either loved it or hated it. It was just kind of like the way that it was just a very, very polarizing production, and
Mhm.
I like being a part of something like that because it
Yeah.
says something. It makes people feel things, and sometimes an audience doesn't like that, or sometimes people love it, and they just can't get enough and, come back over and over and over again. So, it was our director who really wanted this particular kind of production of Oklahoma.
Yeah. Would you say then that in this production, you kinda talk about, like, it's all these different, very polarized people, these different, what do you wanna call it? So, would you say in this production of Oklahoma that this town was representative of modern America as a whole, or just of these particular divides, if that makes
I think
sense?
I think it was in many ways a portrait of America, and again, this was 2019. So, it was a totally different time.
And then lastly, to kind of us on a little bit of a hopeful note, what is one theater, whether you've been in a show there or not, or just seen a show there, that has really gone the extra mile to make themselves accessible to disabled individuals, both audience members and performers and tech and everyone?
The theater that I would love to talk about that it was just a really positive experience for me and really, accessible was when I worked at the Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey, and I did a
Yes.
co-pro with them and, uh, Philadelphia Theater Company, and we did Spelling
Hmm.
Bee. This was, like,
Oh,
2000,
yes.
maybe 10 or 11, and it was
Hmm.
just an amazing experience, Maya, and it was so accessible, and they made so many amazing accommodations, and it just was really
Hmm.
wonderful.
Definitely. Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
So, thank you so, so much, Maya. I
Thank
really am
you.
so proud of you. Great job.
Thank you.